When we last saw each other, we left with a pretty strange statement. This statement was, we create our reality as long as we're not trying to create it. Of all the strange concepts that the field project presents, this has to be one of the strangest. What do you mean? You create your reality as long as you're not trying to create it? It sounds paradoxical. Well, that paradox is what we will tackle head on in today's video. And by exploring it, we will recognize the beauty of the mystery we live in. So, what is a paradox? A paradox is defined as a statement or proposition that is seemingly absurd or self-contradictory, but when investigated or explained may prove to be well-founded or true. Paradox is everywhere. The more we learn about things, the more we see that we know nothing. The more science discovers, explains, the more we realize that with each question we answer, 1,000 more questions come up. So let's not be discouraged by these seemingly paradoxical concepts presented by the field project because upon further investigation and more importantly practice, we see that they are true. So let's get to it. While field theory is a philosophical model rather than a religious one, many regard it as a spiritual path for daily living. In that it deals with fundamental principles, it shares common interest with the world's great spiritual and religious traditions, East and West. Insofar as these traditions also are viewed as addressing the great questions of existence and our place in the universe. For this reason, field theory often cites statements and passages from the various scriptures of these traditions in order to illuminate an understanding of them from the perspective of consciousness as cause. One way field theory shares concept with religious models is in its presentation of the Four Noble Truths of field practice, borrowed from Buddhism, which act as one of the pillars of our models. These truths state the following. First, anything is possible. Second, you can't make anything happen. Third, you can only allow it to happen. Fourth, and this is where the paradox kicks in, if you allow it to happen in order for it to happen, it won't happen. So this means that we can't use this as a strategy to change anything in the world. The last of these truths reminds us to steer clear of the sort of strategic thinking that pervades what we call the New Age models. Let me show you what I mean. There was a young man, for example, who was taking our course with a keen interest in using consciousness techniques to create the return of a girlfriend who had walked out on him. During one of our discussions of the need to release the will and enter in a state of fulfillment for its own sake, he said, "So if I really let her go, then she has to come back, right?" He got snagged on the fourth noble truth of field practice and was caught fast in the New Age error of trying to create conditions that he believed he lacked through an act of will. We can't use field practice to bring about a particular outcome in the world. We can use it, however, to move beyond contradiction and suffering into a state of willingness, non-resistance, and self-friendship that is inherently joyful. When we do that, things work out for us in some fashion, often surprising. But whatever the facts may or may not do, we have taken up residence in the creative authority and self-awareness. This is what most of the time when we use these so-called models to change something in the world, they don't work consistently. We might think we're able to manifest a parking space here and there, but when it comes down to what really matters to us, it doesn't seem to work consistently, right? It's paradoxical in nature. Here's another example of paradox. Field theory tells us that in order to have something we want, we have to be willing to have it, but also not to have it. Which means that we have to be willing both to have it and to let it go. The willingness to have what we want is essential because willingness, not desire, is creative. But the willingness not to have what we want is also essential because entering and remaining in a state of alignment with respect to the desired condition depends on the release of our will. If our will is not released, then the thing that we want can take us hostage. And as long as we can be taken hostage, we remain in a state of contradiction, willfulness, resistance, and suffering. So we have the paradox of having through being willing to have, and at the same time being willing not to have. This can be a tough balance and one that some of our students may struggle with because often the desire for a thing is mistaken for the willingness to have it. But these two are by no means the same or even necessarily in agreement with each other. And wherever desire and beliefs are at odds, belief prevails, since it is our beliefs that define us. This is why it's important to be clear about what we want, but also to be clear about what we are believing. To put this into practice, we do well to ask ourselves certain questions that, if answered honestly, put us in the company of the truth that sets us free. Are we willing to have what we want? This is first. Perhaps we're not. Perhaps we find even the desire embarrassing, or we may have other good reasons for disallowing it. If we're not friendly towards the desire, then we're automatically unfriendly towards its fulfillment. If, however, we approach our desire innocently, without making it bad or wrong, then we may make peace with our desire, welcome it home, ending the war within. Next comes the release of the will. And this is another paradox in itself because our refusal to be taken hostage by something we want, no matter how deeply we may want it, the willingness to have our desire but not to be had by it, establishes it as the center of us, an independence and authority that no fact can assail. Our independence then is interdependence on something greater, and our authority can be exercised fully only in the moment we delegate it. Now, within this context, we can see how the strange statement at the beginning, we create our reality as long as we're not trying to create it, is not so strange after all. In recognizing that the nature of our existence is paradoxical, we're free to play our part and delegate to something bigger than ourselves, knowing and trusting that it has our back. On the third and last video of this series, we will learn about how our identity is what creates our reality. Who we are informs our world and therefore what we experience in it. We will also go deeper in our understanding of what the Field Project is and how it can help us live lives of joy, happiness, and self-friendship. Thanks again for watching and see you soon.